There's a moment that happens at almost every party, every office Monday morning, every family dinner. Someone brings up the game, the room lights up, people start talking over each other, replaying moments, debating calls, and you're sitting there, nodding politely, holding your drink, quietly wondering why any of this matters. You're not cold, you're not antisocial, but something about the whole thing just doesn't land for you the way it lands for everyone else. And here's what nobody ever tells you. That gap you feel isn't a flaw. It's actually a window into something genuinely fascinating about how your brain is built. Because neuroscience has been quietly uncovering something remarkable. The people who feel nothing when a stadium roars aren't missing a piece. They're running a completely different operating system. And once you understand what's actually happening under the hood, you'll never see yourself or the sports fanatics in your life the same way again. Let's start with why sports grip so many people so ferociously. Your brain, at its core, is a social prediction machine. For most of human history, your survival was tied directly to your group. You didn't just prefer belonging, you needed it. And one of the most powerful things your brain learned to do was to track the fortunes of your people like a hawk. Their wins were your wins. Their losses were your losses. That wiring never left us. It just found new outlets. Professional sports, with their tribal colors and territorial rivalries, essentially hijack that ancient circuitry. When a devoted fan watches their team, their brain isn't watching strangers play a game. Neurologically, it's watching its own people fight for survival. The emotional stakes feel real because, to that brain, they are. Now here's where it gets interesting. That same hijacking mechanism, it simply doesn't engage for everyone. And researchers believe a significant part of that comes down to how sensitive your dopamine system is to vicarious or secondhand reward. When a fan's team scores, their reward circuitry lights up almost identically to if they had scored themselves. The brain blurs the line between watching and doing, between someone else's victory and their own. But for people with lower vicarious reward sensitivity, that blurring doesn't happen. You watch the same moment and your brain essentially says, "That wasn't me, that doesn't count." Not out of coldness, out of neurology. And this connects to something even deeper about identity. Psychologists have found that high sports investment is often tied to what's called a group-fused identity, a sense of self that's partly built on collective belonging. For these people, the team's championship isn't just exciting news, it's personal validation. It says something about who they are. People who don't obsess over sports tend to have what researchers call a more individuated self-concept. Their sense of identity is built from the inside out, from their own choices, their own work, their own relationships, rather than borrowed from a collective scoreboard. That's not detachment. That's actually a pretty sophisticated form of psychological self-reliance. But here's the part that will genuinely surprise you. Studies consistently show that people with low sports investment score significantly higher in a trait called openness to experience. This means their brains are strongly drawn to complexity, ambiguity, novelty, the kinds of rewards that don't come with a final buzzer. They tend to find their deep absorption in things that don't resolve cleanly. A novel that leaves you unsettled, a conversation that changes how you see something, a creative problem that doesn't have one right answer. The neuroscience term for these moments of total absorption is a flow state, and the research is clear. Your brain craves them just as intensely as any sports fan craves a championship run. You're just finding them somewhere the crowd isn't looking. There's also the question of how you allocate empathy. Everyone has a finite amount of emotional energy to spend. Sports fans pour a significant portion of theirs into athletes and teams. Strangers, yes, but strangers their brains have adopted as kin. People who don't connect with sports tend to redirect that same emotional bandwidth elsewhere, toward people they can actually affect, toward causes with outcomes they can actually influence, toward relationships where their investment is genuinely reciprocal. It's not that you care less, it's that you care differently and more selectively in ways that often run deeper. Now, there's one more layer worth naming honestly. For some people, the distance from sports culture isn't purely neurological, it's biographical. Maybe you grew up feeling excluded by it. Maybe the aggressive tribalism that often surrounds fandom felt alienating rather than inviting. Maybe you watched adults treat a game with a seriousness that seemed wildly disproportionate, and something in you quietly decided that wasn't where your energy belonged. That's not damage, that's discernment. Both things can be true at once. Your brain may be wired for different rewards, and your history may have reinforced that path early on. So the next time the conversation turns to last night's game, and you feel that familiar, quiet disconnect, here's what's actually happening. Your brain isn't failing to feel something it should. It's simply not being addressed in a language it speaks. You are fluent in a different kind of stakes. You feel the pull of different narratives, and you find meaning in arenas where the outcomes actually include you. That's not a limitation. That's just your particular genius, the one that's been there all along, waiting for you to stop apologizing for it. If this kind of deep dive into how your mind actually works resonates with you, you're going to want to stick around. Drop a comment with the thing that genuinely pulls you into a flow state, the thing that makes hours disappear. And subscribe, because that's exactly the territory we explore here, every single week.